Traditions we assume will try to push drugs to keep us all dumbed down and hope that they will never see the truth around. Another promise, another scene, another package lie to keep us trapped in greed. Another green bells wrapped around our minds, and endless red tape to keep the truth confined. They will not force us. They will stop degrading us. They will not control us. We will be victorious.
Hey everybody, I see Jenna, Wooty here. So I have my comrade back. It's been a minute, but he's been on many times, as I call him, Mr. Cepeda. Thank you so much for joining, looking all sharp and suave for the holiday. Um, so
Very kind.
Whoops. Oh my God,
There
my
she is.
blindness. So much to talk about with this freaking Israel Palestine. You have a new article out. Jenna is gonna put that right in the comments so people can see. Please subscribe to his Substack. And follow him on Twitter because he posts a lot of good stuff. He came on my show once and I kind of adopted him and was like, okay, I'm going to put you in my pocket. And now we're best friends. So, and that was over 2 years ago. But yeah, there's so much to talk about. There's so much going on. I learned some new things today that are just crazy. Do you know who Norman Finkelstein is?
I do.
Oh, I love him so much. Well, a video came out today of a recent interview, and he was stating that every few years, Israel comes out with the saying, "We are mowing the lawn." What's
Yeah.
your response to that?
Yeah, it's important to look very carefully at the language used, and it's difficult for, when it's not in English for, like, say, primary, like, English speakers like ourselves or whatever. But oftentimes, the translations are out there, the transliterations are out there, or the actual language is used in English. Yeah, it's part of. It's important to pay attention to the rhetoric nation states use, especially European settler colonial states like United States or like Israel, because we can find that they're really often very direct and very upfront about their genocidal intentions, about the dehumanization, the way that they look down at the racialized groups, in this case, in America's case, obviously as well, notably indigenous population. Yeah, I mean, it's just this, at the very, very best, something like mowing the lawn or putting Gaza on a diet, which is also stated as, a succinct summation of official policy, in reference to, in kind of sanitized reference to things like cutting off water supply and food and things of that nature. It really, at best, it's paternalistic, but in reality, it's very clearly reveals the way in which they look down on indigenous Palestinians as not human. It's or as either absent or not human. Right, like the project, the settler project there, was based on many things, but some of the propaganda early on was about settling a land with no people, with people with no land. And, the people with no land thing, happy to, like, think about that and debate it in reference to Jewish people of their diaspora. But the land with no people is just a complete erasure grammatically of the indigenous people there, Palestinians. Some of who are and were Muslims, some of them were Jewish, some were Christian, some of them, people of all faiths and stuff like that are, Palestinian and live together in relative harmony, broadly speaking, for centuries and centuries, even under like colonial rule of like Britain and stuff. But yeah, it's really, that type of language really makes clear what they're doing, what they've been doing, what their intentions are. And it's really important. I think, we have a real dark, grisly opportunity where if we, through Twitter or publications, that we get turned on to, if your listeners, if we have the grisly opportunity to listen directly to the language used by the Israeli government, I think that's really useful because our government runs interference for them with their own language. The Israeli government, from generals to politicians, are really to settlers that are interviewed. They're really clear that they are intentionally have been and want to accelerate committing a genocide there. So yeah, that language like that really points to it in a very, very clear way. They admit to doing things. I'm saying they admit to doing things that our government says, "Oh, we're not sure if they're doing it." But if you listen to the actual Israeli government, they're pretty outright and clear with it.
Absolutely. And one of the things I highlight continually is the fact that there are 50,000 Palestinian women who are pregnant right now.
Mm.
And what is the easiest way to commit genocide? To so-called cut off the bloodline, which these women are not going to be able to carry to term. They're not, be it malnourishment, be it the psychological damage, be it because they have no medical care, be it because they blew up the freaking only hospital that does OBGYN care, that delivers the babies. So, and plus you're killing all these children who are the ones who can procreate, and it's like they know what they are doing. This is absolutely genocide. What do you say to people who say you're overreacting, this isn't genocide, they're just defending themselves?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways, depending on one's temperament or mood, that as let's say non-Palestinian like allies, that we can respond to. If you feel so inclined, you can try to take a detached stance and tone and say, listen, neither you nor I are experts, perhaps if we're not, on terms and phenomenons like this, but there are groups, human rights organizations in Israel, outside of Israel, in Europe, in every major region of the earth, and they are all pretty much of one voice in saying that this is an apartheid state that has been committing ethnic cleansing for 7 decades. It is racialized, and and now it's clear with the pace that this renewed killing in Gaza by Israel against Palestinians that they're committing, that it amounts to genocide. So you can take that type of take that type of approach and say, hey, let's just look at what the experts are saying, including Israeli organizations, right? You can also take a different approach and tell people who would say you're overreacting to like 10,000 deaths in a month and tell them to fuck off, because that's a callous stance to take, whatever side you're on. Then we can probe a bit deeper and then really interrogate the Israel defending itself. And I think that is something that I hope more allies like us that are just trying to be better, that we don't back away from that. It is actually a fact that Israel has an apartheid state, that it is an occupying force. It's a belligerently occupying force, which is like a technical belligerent occupation is a technical term under international law. And I'm not a lawyer of any type, but again, we can look at what the international legal community says and what they've set forth. We say it's a belligerent. It's committing belligerent occupation. As such, it does not have rights to self-defense. It precludes that juxtaposition or that power dynamic from even being kind of like constituted grammatically. It is the aggressor. The state of Israel is the aggressor. It is the aggressor in many forms. It is the aggressor in the way it has Gaza as this, open air concentration camp, which controls everything. It's the aggressor in the way it has an apartheid, racial apartheid system against indigenous Palestinians. It's an aggressor in the way that it's expelled 800,000. It expelled 800,000 Palestinians within the first couple of years after 1948 and killed tens of thousands of more. It's the aggressor. And then in 2018, when in Gaza, people organized peaceful protests to walk silently and unarmed towards the fence, which is not a border, but the fence that Israel illegally put up there, that they were just shot and maimed, and they're the aggressor in that regard. They're the aggressor in just by virtue of the state existing, this ethno-theocratic apartheid state. It has no right to exist, and it has no right to defend itself, not morally or not legally under international law. So the aggression don't start in October. The aggression don't start in 2018. The aggression started much, much earlier as this neo-Zionist project, this European project kicked off with the support, if it's at the direction or not. I believe it is. I believe the state of Israel is really, I believe our president when he says that the state of Israel is of crucial utility and importance for the United States as the United States empire. So I believe is in our direction, but let's just say with the support of Britain and the United States, Israel is created. That thing has no right to exist. The United States, as a European settler colonial project, has no right to exist. We can say, like, here we are hundreds and hundreds of years later, what can we do from here on out? And there's really good conversations to have about that, with land back or reparations or any number of things. But the United States has no right to exist. The United States had no right to come in and exterminate hundreds of millions of indigenous people, then have that as our primary, our primitive accumulation of capital, and then had no right then to enslave and traffic, tens of millions of more people from Africa to build that wealth. And then everything we've built since is on the backs of those people, in addition to other groups as well. It has no right to exist. It has no right to defend itself. It had no right to defend itself against Sitting Bull as it tried to exterminate his people. Take your sides, but pretending there's a moral right for Israel to defend itself against the indigenous population that it's been committing ethnic cleansing against for 75 years is an absurdity to anyone with either or both something resembling a conscience or some sliver of historical knowledge. And if we're not there, when we can be forgiven because we're heavily propagandized. But if you hear something like this, and it's incumbent upon you to start researching and reading and listening to Palestinian voices. So it would be a big deal to me if everyone in my neighborhood or in my city was under constant siege from bombing. It was, if 10,000 of us, were killed in the last month. If before that 97% of our water was non-potable either because of an occupying force, it would be a big deal to me. It'd be a big deal if there were, like you said, thousands and thousands of women who are trying to give birth, who don't have hospitals even standing. I was gonna say hospitals with resources, but now, they're bombing hospitals directly. So I think it's pretty absurd. And I think it's really important to push back. And this is going to be difficult too, maybe for people to think about, but I encourage people to look at international law just as a layperson. Just in this regard, I'm a layperson as well. And then look at what the experts say. But occupying settlers are not civilians. under international law. I have my opinions about morally as well, but they're just not. Puritans coming and wiping out indigenous people here, North America, aren't civilians just because they're not enlisted in the military, and people living in Israelis living in these often illegal and always immoral settlements around Gaza and in other places too, in the West Bank. They're not civilians. I'm not even talking about the fact that the Israeli government arms them. I'm not even talking about the fact that IDF, so-called IDF, is reportedly often not allowed to interrupt them in any way as they commit so much violence against Palestinians. But just from the get-go, they're not civilians, and as such, they're not innocent. They're not civilian targets. And so, if there are like militant groups, because Palestinians don't have a military, they don't have an army, they don't have an air force, they don't have that. But if some of these groups, let's say like Hamas or what have you, if that get their hands on some small munitions and stuff like that, if they decide to take up operations against their occupiers that have been committing ethnic cleansing against them, I have no interest in condemning that. I have no interest in saying Israel, even in that moment, Israel has a right to lash back out against that. They don't have no right to do it. If they don't want that happening to them, they should either leave or they should destroy the state as it exists. Like we talked about a couple minutes ago, Joy, Palestinians, you have always included, since these religions existed, Jewish people, Muslim people, Christian people, secular people. You can stay there. But this ethno-theocratic apartheid state government has to be destroyed. So there is no defending what Israel has done for 75 years, and there's no defending what Israel has done since October 7th. And in fact, I don't think what the militant groups reportedly did in going through a wall and attempting to and then taking prisoners and taking lives of the occupying force, I don't think that even needs to be defended.
Yeah, one of the things, I digress a little, but one of the things I saw 2 days ago that just there's so much to be disgusted about, but this woman who is Israeli posted something, and she had a link to the IDF in her bio, so either she works for them or she
big fan.
Yeah. So she showed footage driving through, it wasn't her necessarily, but Israeli forces like IDF driving through Palestine, and all the rubble now has hundreds of Israeli flags over the rubble that once was Palestinian homes. And she commented, Palestine is getting an upgrade.
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh my God.
Well, death is a civilizing force. That's to European settler colonial genocidal mindsets, right? We see that. We saw it here in North America. Hey, you know what? We can't save. Let's save the slaves' soul by brutalizing and enslaving their body. You can justify anything when you don't believe others are, when you other people and when you don't believe they're human or of equal worth as you. When you dehumanize them, you can justify anything, because if they are not human, their language, their values, everything, their civilization, their schools, their religions, they're all less than yours. So anything, your presence there, even your destructive, annihilating presence, is an improvement for that place and that mindset. No, it's good. I want all my commentary to have soundtracks to it. It helps. It punches it up.
So last night there was an announcement. Okay, we're gonna, after several tries with Israel, to do essentially a deal as to release hostages and so on. They've declined several. Now,
Yeah.
last night a deal was made. It. I, I want you to say how you feel, and then I'll go into mine. So essentially, Hamas would release 50 Israeli people that they have captured, and then they want 150 political prisoners of Palestinians that Israeli captured out of the 7,300 that have been there for years. And they also want 300 mutual aid trucks for 2.2 million people. And Israel just announced it will not happen before Friday.
Mm.
So they are saying a ceasefire for now. What was your response when you saw the technicalities of what this ceasefire is and the negotiations, so to speak?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's a meager comfort to those not receiving it or those for whom it'll arrive too late. So yes, and again, it's a shame that this occupying apartheid government has to be negotiated with. There's just an asymmetry in power, of course, and that requires that, which I would imagine goes a long way, at least structurally. I have no insight into any leadership's mindset or much even philosophy, if there's one that spans person and time. But it probably goes a long way in explaining the tactics that are blithely called terrorism used as well. It's what you do when you don't have an atomic bomb, when you don't when you're not one of the largest weapons manufacturers. You don't have the world's hegemons and big powers behind you. You do what you can. So it's a shame that has to even be done. But I mean, I suppose there is precedent for this, where Israel does so value Israeli lives more than non-Israeli lives, or Palestinian lives in particular, where they have in the past given more of their completely illegitimately held political prisoners than they receive back. So it would seem to underline even after the fact, whether it's intentional or planned or coincidental, some of the logic and immediate utility on the ground of doing things like taking prisoners. We can call them what people want to call them, hostages, but they won't call, like you said, over 7,000 Palestine, including many, 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 many children held by Israel. They call those, they either ignore them, they don't exist, or they'll call them prisoners. I mean, those are hostages. They won't call them hostages. Those are
Yeah.
political prisoners. Those are concentration camp, victims, right? But they don't call them that. So, Hamas took prisoners. They took far fewer prisoners than Israel has of their own of Palestinian ranks, and it would appear that they're now able to return some of those. They will be able to return some of those back in exchange for many of the Palestinians who are already held. So that would be, I would imagine, have to be considered a success. And if the best and probably very inaccurate way to describe this, the best in terms of, I shouldn't say best, but maybe the most magnanimous and unnecessarily even-handed way of describing this would be like a war. I don't think it is a war. You have one occupying force of the military and then indigenous people without any military. I don't think that's much of a war, but the only benefit of maybe calling it a war is to say what Hamas did is, if you then say what Hamas did is took prisoners, non-civilian prisoners, because settlers aren't civilians. I mean, I can't just go to a place and say this is where I live and you can't live here anymore and your family is never allowed to be here and say I'm a civilian. That's absurd. So if that happens, I'm glad. To your implied points, it's sad that there's a delay. It's sad that this is the best it could be gotten, but I imagine for the Palestinians, which hopefully will be freed, it will make all the difference in the world. And I would imagine, if I just try to empathize and put myself in their place or the family's place, that I would be very, very, very thankful that action was taken in early October, in order to have a negotiating position to get me back home.
I think one of my biggest concerns is that the Israeli propaganda is so freaking huge. Like, they themselves have killed the hostages because, they've blown up places that they've been in. So one of my concerns is they say, no, we only got, not now because they're only getting 50, but we only got 190. There's supposed to be 200. We're still going to keep bombing. There's that concern. There's also a concern that they will provoke Hamas during a ceasefire. Hamas will respond, and then they'll say, nope, no more aid, no more ceasefires. We're not working with you anymore. Let's continue the genocide. There's so many things. Like, I don't trust Israel. You know what I mean? There's no reason for us to trust them. They have all the money in the world. They have all the bombs in the world. And then the other thing I learned today that was so fascinating. You were talking about the land and colonization. Well, I saw this gentleman on TikTok, and he said, why don't Israelis take DNA tests and we'll see if it shows they're Israeli or Palestinian? And I thought, wow, that's so fascinating. But then he said they can't take it because DNA tests are illegal in Israel. They're illegal. Like, what?
That's funny.
That's
I had not heard that. Yeah, that's funny. So I guess they're trying to say, like, hey, see if you have, if you're, if your DNA goes back to Palestine hundreds and thousands of years, perhaps, as opposed to Poland or Philadelphia or like their prime minister or something.
Hey,
I guess
leave my town out of that shit.
Is that the idea? Yeah, I mean, in that case, certainly in that case, I would imagine, it would be difficult for many people whose families, in the last, couple decades came to to Palestine for the first time in either ever or thousands of years. I would imagine it'd be difficult for them to have all these markers in their in their test, as much as, let's say, Palestinian people who have not left there until they were forced out for thousands of years. I didn't realize that. But yeah, this is, listen, if people want to hold on to some idea that, like, because I believe in the non-historically verifiable people like Moses or Joshua or I don't know, what have you, because I believe in that stuff, religiously, I definitely have, I want to be in Palestine. They're free to. They just can't behave like Joshua when they get there. They can't go and do, and say we're going to wipe out the Amalekites or the modern people now, like the prime minister is citing from scripture. You can't do that. You can be there. There's that's fine. There's not that many, relatively speaking, Jewish folks in the entire world. They can live there. You just can't go there and take it over and say this is a Jewish ethno state and a religious state. But yeah, once you start doing that, and you create all these recent myths, then I guess you can't ask certain questions, and I guess you can't really think about like things like, hey, why do we have really, really high skin cancer rates like Australia, another European settler colonial state? It's because we're not built for this climate anymore. So yeah, that's kind of crazy. I didn't hear that about the DNA test. I know, like, a lot of things there are illegal, like like expressing sympathy for Palestinian people, or
Right.
holding a flag up, or gay marriage. I knew those things were illegal in
Or
Israel.
crossing a certain street.
Yeah, crossing a certain street. Yeah, I didn't know that DNA tests weren't big there or allowed.
Yeah, it's just insane. I know you have to go. You have plans. Thank you so much for joining. What is a lasting thought? And stay tuned, you guys, because I'll continue for a little bit. But what is something you want to leave with the audience about Israel, Palestine, or a message you want to give people? Something you just want to leave with them.
Yeah, there's so many, but I guess one thing that's with me now, Joy, and thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry that I have to go quicker than I usually get to stay on. Just please have me on again soon.
Of
But
course.
I would say one thing is, just as an American, that is really with me now is, and I want people to really reflect on, if assuming maybe a large part of the audience is American, is that our government is not just like tacitly approving this or funding it, or friendly to it. This is a proxy state. Israel is a proxy state of the United States at this point, of our empire. It exists in the way it exists, as an apartheid state that's committing genocide, because our government requires it to, because the companies that have our government in corporate capture, arms dealers and other types of holdings, require these testing grounds for weapons on indigenous people. These conflicts improve stock prices of so many of these companies. Like it exists because we need it to. It is. I am not. I think it's. Maybe I'm wrong, but I do not believe, and it's not because I'm worried about being called anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish, but I do not believe that it is. It appears on the surface level, but I do not believe that is like Zionist lobby that controls, or that has undue influence over our government. I believe that it's useful for our government to make it seem that way, but it is in fact United States and Britain, but the United States now, that utilize really niche European movement of Zionism to really expand its empire and its position geopolitically in military terms out there. So it exists, and this is happening because America needs it to. And so if we have reflections on how this apartheid state needs to be destroyed, I think we really, really, really need to reflect on what does our system need to have done with it here in America, because I don't think they're separated. I don't think we can separate them. I think they're inseparable. I think they're inextricably tied together. And I think we need to really consider that. It's really important that we don't just talk about Israel. We talk about US/Israel, in my view.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, comrade. I love you. Happy holidays. Give Margot my love as well. Have fun this weekend, and we will talk soon. You're welcome anytime.
Thank you, Joy. Much love. Appreciate you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, and if I do see a lot of comments, if you're new here, I apologize. I am mostly blind, so I cannot read the comments during the show, but I can use my accessibility device after, and I always read them. One of the things I wanted to talk about is, I fear that, the very few candidates and politicians who have said or posted hashtag ceasefire now are going to think this is some kind of victory, when it's not. What so many of us activists mean when we say ceasefire is permanently. We don't mean what's going on. We don't mean for 48 hours. We don't mean, with the pretty much guarantee that it's going to start again. We want this violence, murder, everything done. We also want an end to colonization and apartheid. And, And we want the 1.8 million Palestinians who are unhoused to be able to try to start to rebuild. This is even, I was talking the other night that, we tend to talk about casualties as in people who have died. But the fact of the matter is, every single person who's Palestinian is a casualty, because let's face it, every single person in Gaza and some in the West Bank their lives are ruined. I mean, quite frankly, they have no home. They've lost members of their family. They have no food, no water, no medical care. I mean, their lives, those who actually survive, their lives, they will never be able to thrive again, ever. And I have a lot of empathy for Palestinians who said, even if we were able to leave, we wouldn't, because we know if we leave, we will never be able to get back. Once we leave, they take this land, it's no more. Palestine is completely gone forever. But then they stay and they risk being murdered. So it's just heartbreaking. I also want to say that now more than 60 journalists who have been covering Palestine have been murdered in the past 5 weeks. And, we're still seeing people get fired from their jobs for having the audacity to share pro-Palestine tweets or Instagram posts. Queen Susan Sarandon was let go of her talent agency of many years yesterday for having the audacity of speaking at a pro-Palestinian rally. That blows my mind, because this chick has been in the streets for decades. You knew she was always marching for healthcare, for environment, for anti-war, that woman has been in the streets for years. You knew this. Why is this any different? So the fact, and hello, she's one of the best actors of our freaking lifetime. So the fact that they are that offended, that how dare she go speak, on behalf of Palestine and call it a genocide, which is what they were most offended by. That just says how they are. And they've also fired other employees. And what's really interesting is Tom Cruise was trending yesterday, because one of the publicists at the talent agency was fired for sharing a pro-Palestine tweet, and Tom Cruise legit went down to the agency himself and demanded she get her job back. I don't know what I thought where he stood humanitarian wise, but I was like, oh, okay. Well, go Tom. Cardi B came out. Cardi B has been just a badass forever. So she's like, I do not endorse Biden. I don't approve of what he's doing in Palestine and Ukraine. And that's big, because you take a pop star or what have you, and with their millions of followers, and they speak out on this, there's a lot of young people who are going to be like, oh, interesting, let me look into this. So that's a big fucking deal. So we are seeing more and more people come out, and I think it's because we are seeing the death toll rise more and more as well. And my fear is how much longer? Are we really convinced that if all 200 hostages are given back, that this will just stop. Hell no. Not a chance in hell. And even if it did, I'd say there's a 1 in a billion chance, but even if it did, the fact that it would not be apartheid, not be colonialism and stuff, in any way you look at it, this is not going to be rectified. You know, any dropping of bombs or what have you, any cease to that is not going to rectify this 75 years of pain, of being in what's called an open air prison, of deaths that have been happening for 75 years, not since October 7th. Nothing is going to rectify this whatsoever. And it's, you know, it's important that people acknowledge that even if, I mean, 2008, 2014, you know, these things have been happening every few years, and it's gonna keep happening. It's just this time they were able to blame Hamas, when the other times they just did it on their fucking own, which is why it didn't make news. It's frustrating, it's disgusting, but I have so many props for the people in Israel who are standing there and marching in the streets and saying, we don't want this. And there's a lot of them, and more power to them. That is amazing. We need that. We need them to speak out, and it is not easy for them to speak out. A week and a half ago, I did a Spaces, and a gentleman named Khalil called in, and he called from Gaza. He's a journalist, and he spoke for about 20 minutes, and 5 explosions went off during that conversation. And it fucked me up so bad, because not just because of that, but because he had no reaction. Because he wasn't crying, he wasn't angry. He just said, you can hear that, right? It doesn't stop. And he was saying things like, when I die. And the one day he didn't post anything on Twitter, and I freaked the fuck out, because when bombing is that close that you can fucking hear it, I could hear it on the phone, you know. Then another gentleman called in from Gaza. You could hear drones above him the entire time. 2 gentlemen called in, well, 3, one was a translator, called in from Egypt, and they said, you know what, we stand with Palestine. They are welcome here anytime. Israel has bombed our country as well. In fact, Israel bombed them last month when they bombed 4 different places in one day. And, you know, these Egyptian gentlemen were saying, you know, we want to do more. We can't get in. They can't get in to here. There's no, there is literally no possible way. And Egyptians welcome them with open arms, but there's no way to physically get there from Palestine without being shot. There isn't. So these people are welcome in the neighboring place, but they can't go. They know if they go there, they will be able to have food and water and be a million times more safe, but they can't fucking go. It's not like there's nowhere for them to go. There is a place for them to go that is so close, but they can't. And I can't even fathom how hard that is to try and wrap your brain around. I also, and I'm so looking forward to seeing your comments after the show. I also have a very hard time believing the number of 12,000 dead. When you look at the destruction, and you look at the hospitals, and you look at the parking garages, and you look at the schools, and just the rubble as far as the eye can see. No, I don't believe 12,000. I do not believe. Now, to be clear, 12,000 is too many, period. I'm not minimizing that and saying only 12,000. I'm just saying I do not believe that number. I don't. And even the White House 2 days ago came out and said the number is likely higher. And when at first they were saying, no, Hamas is the one that gives the death toll and we have no reason to believe them, then the list of names came out and so on. And like, are the names fake? No, they're not. So there's the only thing that's giving me even some semblance of hope is when I get out in the streets and I march with people, and also seeing other people doing sit-ins and marching in their cities and disrupting politicians and candidates. That's the only thing that gives me hope, because as an activist of years, activist fatigue is so fucking real. And we saw it even with George Floyd. We saw it. After a while, people just get exhausted. And it's so important to do self-care along the way. But that is such a fear of mine and so many other Palestinians I've met in Pennsylvania, where I am, and in DC. They are scared that the fatigue is coming. And it's so important that even last night with this announcement of these breadcrumbs, we cannot stop. We can't. It's not enough. It's not. So we have to keep going. People in Palestine do know. They know. Those I've talked to in Gaza, they know. Even though their internet is cut off all the time, when they do have electricity and are able to charge their phones and stuff, they know. And they're thankful. That's all we can do. That's it. That's all we can do. Keep harassing your elected officials who are absolute trash. Keep showing up to their campaign events, to their fucking, whatever they're doing. Keep going to the representatives' offices. Keep doing sit-ins with groups like Jewish Voice for Peace, who I've had a couple people on the show from, who are just like absolute badasses. Keep being active. And as a disabled person, I'm going to be 100% real. I know not everybody can get out in the streets. I know not everybody has the monetary means to go places to march. I certainly haven't. I've gotten lucky and had rides. So I know not everybody is able. I also know people in my life who are Muslim who do not feel safe going to protest. So I understand not everybody can. and those who can't, even posting online, even sharing these things with your families. Tomorrow is gonna be chaos. People sitting at their table with family. Oh my God, I'm dreading it. We all thought that, like, Trump, Queen Hillary losing, Hilbatross, losing, and then Trumping in power, that Thanksgiving was bad. Whew, this is gonna be bad. Oh my God, I have such bad anxiety. I can't keep my fucking mouth shut, man. Like, I can't. I physically can't. I can't do the nod and smile. I just can't. So, not that I necessarily think the people I'll be with are pro-Israel, but I do know they do the both sides are wrong type thing. I can't. I just fucking can't, you guys. I can't. I very well may storm off. I just can't fucking help it. I mean, we're talking about humanity here. And, sometimes speaking out, you're not going to change their minds, but you just can't keep it inside. Because that you're doing an injustice to the people who are counting on us. So stand up for what you believe in. Keep fighting. Tomorrow, please remember to give thanks to the indigenous people whose land we stole, and also the indigenous people who are having their land stolen right now. Thank you so much for watching. Much love. You guys are amazing. Please press like, share, and subscribe. Thank you all. Take care.